I would like to welcome everyone to the 60th episode of Money Trees. You know, the lens through which we examine our lives is constantly shifting. I would say that self expression is paramount to the human experience, and today's guest is approaching mastery of communicating that expression with the world. From behind and in front of an actual lens, this person finds ways to immerse the viewer while telling a story that's worth 10,000 words. It is truly an honor to have Moyosore Briggs, aka The Count, here on Money Trees. How are you feeling today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm honestly feeling really, really good. It's not every day within the space I get to talk about myself or my art practice, so I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I am extremely excited to chop up with you. And you just kind of alluded to it. You have spoken at length in Twitter spaces, and I know that you are a veteran in these formats. You've also spoken in highly accredited print formats, numerous other mediums. And yeah, I'm just excited to be exploring more of your own art. Hold on, I apologize for that feedback. What's happening with my mic? Um, Technology never wants to work when you want it to. Okay, there we go. Anyway, back to our
Amazing.
regularly scheduled program. It is incredibly difficult to define a person as the nature of a person extends far beyond what any summary can provide. You just moved into your dream apartment because of NFTs. What do you say to people when they ask what you do?
That's kind of difficult to answer. Like I still don't know how to perfectly describe what I do. I mean, honestly, it's in every sense of the word very much like a gaslight gatekeep girl boss vibe that I have going on right now. Because alongside working within the NFT space, I do work as a model and I've worked as a photographer for a number of years since I was quite young, since I was a teenager. And it wasn't until last year I stepped into the world of Web3 and NFTs and the how fast everything has happened honestly still shocks me till today, because I was just having a conversation with someone where I was describing how this time last year I was not even too clear on what an NFT was, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to create and explore. And now I'm working for one of the top NFT marketplaces within the space. I've sold multiple NFTs, and like you said, I've moved into my dream space in my dream city. This isn't something that I expected to happen, but working as an artist, I've never made being a creative my side job or a backup. It was always something that I knew that I had to do. I had to achieve all my goals through art, no matter how stubborn that was. It was just something that I had to do and I had to achieve. And so it was endless and tireless work, really, and the emergence of Web3 and NFTs in my life just kind of accelerated the process.
You know, you spoke about how the incumbents kind of dominate the physical realm. And so it's made sense for up and comers to take control in this metaverse space. And the fact that for you, you know, this was never an option. It was always something that had to happen. It completely makes sense you found the success that you've had because you've dove into it head first and done, first of all, the work is amazing. And I might say that 10 times this episode, but I kid you not. Okay, I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I try to consider the perspective of my guest versus my own when I'm preparing for the episodes. Find wherever our similarities are, wherever some potential points of contention, and when I was exploring your work, it just felt like every layer that I peeled back, it got even crazier, even more interesting, even more real, and it was just an amazing experience. To try to bring it full circle, there was a quote that you have in the Independent and in that article where you said, "I don't wake up and think about, oh, what cafe am I going to go to, or oh, what friends am I going to see." I think about the internet and how I need to speak to somebody who is in a different country, but we can only meet in an art gallery that's been built on the Ethereum blockchain. And for me, it was this sort of like duh moment because look at how I planned on even talking with you in this Twitter space, and we're halfway across the world from each other. And how much doper could it be if these money tree talks were happening in a virtual and immersive garden? And you got my brain turning, and it feels like I unlocked a new level even in just exploring your, and that wasn't even necessarily art, it was you talking about your space. So I want to thank you for that because shout out to you. And I actually have some really ill ideas I'm going to be exploring post this. My big question in there, I would say, is again, it was kind of a duh moment, which meant I was a little bit on the, I call it the other side, where when I thought about the metaverse, it didn't feel like a place that needed to be separate from the physical. And the idea of like plugging yourself into the matrix seemed like a disconnect for me. And the more I explored your work and looked at your perspective with it, it just started hitting me like, there is a lot of value in this. And you talked about being fully in the metaverse by 2050 and you're 10% of the way there. For you, what was that moment that clicked that you were like, okay, I get why or I belong in the metaverse? I'll say that.
I mean, to answer that question, I have to kind of go back to what you mentioned about the Matrix. So for me as an artist, it's always been kind of like a running joke with friends, even people I've dated who are artists, where I would always talk about one day I'm gonna like completely upload myself onto the drive. Like this was just always a joke I would make with friends. And once I stepped into like the Web3 community and the NFT space, what completely drew me to NFTs in particular was the idea of provenance and digital ownership, proof of ownership, like the smart contracts and the code. That was the perfect immutable way for me to begin the process of uploading myself into the drive. Anytime I turn an art piece into an NFT, I am cementing it into the foundation of Web3 and even Web2 because it's all come full circle. So for me, this has always been, as an artist, pre-internet. Like from the minute I started using the internet and going on those like funny websites in like the early 2010s, like late 2009, I've always had the idea that one day I would be able to upload not only my mind, my thoughts, emotions onto the drive that is the internet. And NFTs have given me the ability to do that. I don't know if there was a specific day for myself where I kind of realized that. I would say maybe the first day I made an NFT, because for me, it's interesting to say, and it's almost, I don't want to, it's almost pretentious, but it's kind of like what we spoke about earlier, where I always knew that this would be an avenue for me. There would be an avenue at some point in time where I would be able to achieve that goal of tapping into the matrix, and that was NFTs for me. And so the first day I minted that first NFT and made that first sale, it was like, it was the opposite of putting on the rose-colored glasses. It was like I took off the rose-colored glasses and my entire being and persona became the metaverse. And it's funny, there's another running joke. I feel like all my bad jokes kind of revolve around NFTs and the metaverse. But another one is the older I get, the more I do not want to be perceived by people, which is very, like, it's very antisocial of myself, but like, it really ties into how I approach the metaverse and the concept of being uploaded onto the drive. I want to, at some point outside of the things that I've done or achieved, I want there to be a very solid collection of my entire persona and essence as an individual to be on the internet, hence the visiting of virtual galleries or waking up and immediately like tapping into having my 15 minutes in my VR headset to just like disconnect a little bit. But I think it's interesting that for some people, the internet and the metaverse is almost like a separate reality. For me, I don't really view it that way. And maybe it's because the internet in particular was introduced to me at such an early age. Like the first time I was allowed to like use a laptop, I was probably like maybe 6 or 7, like early 2000s. And for me, it's like this was everything that I'm doing was almost inevitable. Like I knew it would come to pass, which is interesting to say, but like it ties back to what I said earlier. This was always the goal. It was never the backup plan.
Yo, I have to thank you because it was really just like this aha moment for me because I've shared a lot of those sentiments actually, where and this gets a little this can be misconstrued, so I'm going to try to word it appropriately, but I love the idea of uploading my consciousness because I've always struggled with the concept of death. And I was like, man, well, with technology, like, what are we actually? If I was a clone and I had all the same memories, am I the same person or is it a different person? And if I'm just my thoughts, if there's a way to capture and put this somewhere, then I could kind of just be eternal. And, that sounds a little science fictiony. And when I was reading a lot of the things that you were saying and even looking at the work, it started connecting with me in a way that I hadn't seen before. And so you mentioned the fact that you've been using the internet for so long that it's second nature at this point. And for a lot of people, the separation between IRL and URL doesn't they don't want that to exist. You said something that's crazy, but not crazy, but like crazy dope to me, that you kind of don't even necessarily want to be perceived. And I've been struggling with that where I'm like, why do people want to go and adjust their identity online? When I read your article in Tissue, which was incredibly well written, it was so vulnerable, but it presented a story that I've only ever seen maybe once in pop culture on a Netflix show. And it became clear that your experience as an ace had influenced your artistry, your creative journey, your perspective. I recommend everyone listening to this back go and read it. I will add the link into the description. But when I read that, it was just this kind of like, yo, I really am. And that's why in my intro, I talked about the lens through which we examine our lives is constantly shifting. Because when you're given these other perspectives, you're able to kind of see it from these different angles. And there isn't really much of a question in here, too. I just had to kind of shout that out. The Tissue article, it would be deserving of its own space in addressing that. So I don't want to have to push towards that. But the more I dove into your art, the more I started understanding the metaverse, which seems kind of wild to me because I would have considered myself this last year being heavily surrounded by Web3 and crypto and NFTs. And it was again like I unlocked this whole brand new level with this. I want to pivot and talk a little bit about your art itself because we can understand the perspective that's got you to this point. And when you look at your art, it is so striking. You cover a lot of people in blood in your portraits. Is that real blood or do we have like what is the best blood substitute?
It's not real blood, I mean, but I can only say not yet. But I have an insane obsession with Cryolan fake blood, which for years I had stocked up. And honestly, it was pretty much like always a running joke. Like if my friends would come over to where I was, or if people would call me and message me and just be like, hey, Moyo, can you bring some blood over? Like, we're doing a shoot. And literally, I'd be like, yo, say less, bet, I got it, I'm on it. I was like the supplier of blood, which funnily enough is kind of how my artist moniker, The Count, came about, really just like encapsulating that whole vibe of being a vampire in modern times that is not perceived. It all kind of like ties back into each other. But yeah, with my creative work, especially my portraits of others, which intrinsically tie to my self-portraits as well, really all my work, even my written work, revolves around the further understanding of the self, the idea of the self, the concept of the self. how we're perceived by others, how others perceive us. And when I first began to explore self-portraiture, the work really revolved around the masks that we hide behind, the masks that we present to others. And it wasn't until last year or the year before during the pandemic when I finally got my official ADHD diagnosis, marking me as neurodivergent. And so it was so interesting that all my self-portraits were this constant search for the understanding of oneself, the act of hiding behind a mask or presenting as a multitude of characters that kind of represent the multifacetedness of being. And once I got that diagnosis, it all kind of just made sense, where it was like the search I was looking for was in front of me all along. But it was so interesting how for so many years that had impacted my work and the way I presented myself. And with creating self-portraits, my self-portraits have also always just been an outlet, because I grew up in Nigeria. I went to school there for many years, and I began taking pictures when I was still living in Nigeria, going to secondary school. And not for me, like full circle, not knowing I was neurodivergent at that time, you can only imagine how difficult the experience was being in a very conservative country, conservative school, and being an artist and being a creator. And so when I began taking photographs, photographing others, it was trying to understand how I could connect with people through the camera, because I couldn't do that physically as an individual through conversation. So the lens was how I connected with others. And then when I began to turn the camera onto myself with self-portraiture, it was to try and understand myself, try to understand why I was feeling the multitude of emotions that I was experiencing. Why was I sad? Why was I unhappy? Why was I not being the self that I knew that I could be? And it took me many, many years, honestly, to get to the point of stability that I am at now. But I would definitely give a lot of that to being a photographer and like turning the camera onto myself. I feel like if one wants to truly understand the different sides to themselves, you definitely have to turn your camera onto yourself to do that.
Now that you've found the stability, how do you continue to challenge yourself when taking these self-portraits and telling such vivid stories that you do?
So it's a bit interesting. I mean, I really love this question as well. At the moment, in finding the stability, it's almost stifled my ability to photograph myself, which obviously would make sense because for many years, my self portraiture and turning the camera onto myself has been a tool to escape things or discover things surrounding myself. It was almost like a tool for emotional stability, an escape of sorts. And since finding stability, I have finally reached a point where all the burnout of all these years that have passed and constantly creating to understand and trying to understand, I've reached a point where my brain is like, you don't have to do that right now. And so I've only created a few self-portraits for specific projects, but they've been commissioned works. I haven't yet put the camera in front of myself to photograph for myself, and which is sad, but at the same time, it's almost a blessing in disguise, because it shows that I've reached a point where I know about myself enough to not need to turn the lens back onto myself for now. And while I take this time to rest and to grow and to build and learn more about myself and also explore all the like other facets that I haven't yet explored as a very young woman. I only just turned 23 in December, so I feel like the multitude of experiences that I finally have reached a point where I need to be able to look back on memories and not constantly forget things, if that makes sense. And once this stage of rest has passed, I'll be able to then pick up my camera again and explore self-portraiture as a lens to not even really understand, but to begin to document from a lighter place.
I love that. I think that that growth and even the stifling, like it's a net positive where when you do go back and whatever challenges you face that will require you to look inward, you'll kind of have that muscle trained and be able to capture and learn entirely new things about yourself, especially as you age, like being very, very young and having already accomplished so much. You know, your bio is photographer, model, collector, NFT artist, voiceover actress, videographer, writer, cult leader. We cannot forget about that. Out of all of the, let's say, artistic mediums that you work in, which one right now are you finding you have the most passion for?
Definitely writing at the moment. I would say it has to be writing for sure. So at the moment and also curation. I've been focusing a lot more on putting my time and attention on how to support other artists, especially younger artists, and I mean I would even say education as well. They all kind of encompass the same under they're all under the same umbrella, but writing at the moment, I think it was something that I used to do before I tapped into photography as a young girl while I was still a preteen. And I didn't even notice when I kind of abandoned it. I was thinking the other day about how I used to fervently write like poems and like short stories, and writing was something that I used to do quite a lot, but I abandoned it at some point. I'm not even too sure when. And recently I've begun to pick that back up. I'm currently working on a project called The Antithene with my Metaverse creative partner, who is an illustrator, an amazing illustrator, Esther. And within that project, I've been building and writing out the lore and the storyline of a universe and world building, and being able to tap back into writing, which comes first in everything, I believe. To write, to speak, I have a strong belief that there's power behind the word and spoken word. So being able to explore that, especially from a place of stability where I'm not being chased by any demons right now, it really it really gives me the comfort and ability to explore so much. And also, just this morning I was thinking about how I've missed being able to sit down and research things, to read other people's written work and gain inspiration from that, because these were things that when I first got into photography, I would do. I would sit down for days on end reading about Japanese photographers like Daido Moriyama, Eiko Hosoe, and being able to finally return to that place of comfort. Although what has changed now is like the difference in emotion compared to 13-year-old Moyo to 23-year-old Moyo in this decade that has passed is I I'm comfort I'm comfortable. I'm stable. And writing for now is definitely it's definitely the path I'm very, very excited to explore more. It's something I've always said I would do, especially when I was in art school, writing artistic papers, writing articles, as you've seen in Tissue Magazine, is something I enjoy greatly.
Hearing about your inspirations is very dope. And I love the fact that you are centering writing right now. Again, that article was so incredibly well written, and you took us on this roller coaster of emotion. And it felt like I was right there with you, trying to explain this to the people in your lives that just haven't gotten it. And it had when it came to an end, it felt like there was still more of that story to be told. Like it did not feel resolved, but it had a good ending. And so it was this weird like craving for more, but understanding that this is the story up until this point, and I would just have to follow the journey to see how it progresses. On the NFT that we have pinned up at the top, the one who cries blood, you credit or you say I might butcher the name, Kanito Shindo would be proud, who I had to go look up and explore some of their work. Were you doing the voiceover that was in Japanese for that video?
I was. Funnily enough, where I live now in Southampton, it's also a place I grew up as a young teenager and preteen. And when I was about 14, 15, right after graduating from high school, this was where I did a short course in Japanese at the University of Southampton and studied Japanese for a time. I'm extremely rusty now. I still have all my writing skills though, thankfully. But yeah, I did do the voiceover for the piece, and it's funny how now full circle I'm back in the space that taught me how to explore the language.
Okay, so this is I come from a family. My mom's side, most of my family speaks Spanish. They're Panamanian. On my dad's side, most of my family speaks Dutch. They're Surinamese. And I found that writing in different languages kind of works other parts of your brain and your storytelling shifts. Do you speak any other languages outside of English and Japanese?
I do. I'm a little bit rusty now, but my pandemic language was Norwegian, and I would literally oh, this is really unlocking like memories for me from the pandemic and when I was finally able to see people. And I don't know why. Okay, I love Norwegian. I love Norwegian mythology. And I just remember I watched like a TV show, and in that moment I was like, I'm gonna learn this. I'm gonna do it now. And it was so funny. I would go to parties and like just be going off like, oh yeah, I snakker norsk, and people would be looking for other Norwegians in parties so that I could have conversations and practice. But for me, like with languages, especially outside of like the fact that it grants us the ability to connect even more with other people within my art practice and for myself as an individual, I find it very important to, even if you don't learn the complete language, being able to pick up words or phrases from a multitude of languages, like a jack of all trade, master of none is better than nothing at all type of vibe. It really helps me to connect with other people, and traveling is something that's very important to me as an individual that exists within the space and as a person. So being able to show people as well that you appreciate the not even their language per se, but you appreciate them enough to want to hear them in their native tongue. I find that very important. Like, even if I don't understand completely what you're saying, I want to show you that I appreciate you enough as an individual to take in some of the words that are of your mother tongue. And that's something that presents itself in any individual that I meet, whether they're Brazilian or Norwegian or Japanese. Or Arabic. I will pick up as much of the language as I can to show my appreciation for that other person.
Finding ways to communicate with people, I think, is excuse me, I won't say it's paramount to the human experience. We've already talked self expression is, but that's up there. I would say in my top three. I talked earlier about how learning about your perspective or trying to, I guess, learn from your perspective, I would say is a more accurate way to phrase that, has helped me adjust my mindset and understand value in a way that I previously hadn't seen. You can think of communication in a very similar way. When you can find ways to communicate with people, like I said, at their base level, at their native tongue, it can create a bond and a relationship that previously wasn't available. When I think about so first of all, shout out to you and your voiceover voice. I love the voice. And this is a random question. Have you ever done ASMR?
I have not, because honestly, I can't stand ASMR like from other people. Like, I've really tried to tap into it, but man, once they start running their nails across the microphone, I'm like, cut the cameras, dead ass, like get me out of here today.
Okay, so that's hilarious because I'm similar, but there's ASMR that I rock with, and then some that I absolutely cannot deal with. Like I don't like the ones where people are chewing, but I just thought that because you have a very like soft. it was funny when in the independent article it talked about it may sound like you wafted in on a cloud, and then I heard you speaking, and I'm like, no, your voice sounds like that, even though your ideas aren't. Little random side bit. Speaking on hearing you speak, you are currently working at Rarible. And so being a successful artist and then also finding a way to contribute, you talked about how important education is. You talked about how important helping other artists find their ways in this space is. What's it been like for you finding that balance between having a more structured job and then still allowing your creativity to flow freely?
It kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier, where since working at Rarible and it's primarily since entering the NFT space, really, the closer I've come to that stability, I've kind of put my own art and creation on the back burner for a little bit, but then it also allows me and grants me the time to focus on things like curation and education within the space. So I've spoken on panels about being a member of DAOs. I've taught classes on the creation of NFTs and entering in the Web3 space, and it's it's not easy being already being a multidisciplinary artist. It always sometimes feels like there's just too much on my plate, and then also adding on top of that working within the creative industry, it can be a lot at some point, but I think it's really about finding the balance. But honestly, I'm just very much I have ADHD, like I mentioned before. I feel I'm constantly pushing myself to the limits of what I can achieve and what I can do. Like if I this is why I also said earlier, spoken word is very important to me. I am very conscious of the things that I say out loud, because there was something a friend of mine said maybe over a decade ago when I was still in high school. Randomly, he said to me, "You always do the things that you say you will do." And ever since we had that conversation, I realized that anytime I say out loud, especially that I'm going to do something, it's almost like something goes off in my brain where I must achieve that thing or I must act on that thing. So I try to be very conscious of what I say about the things that I plan to do, but also within that I don't push myself past the limits of what I know I can do. And luckily for me, the limit is very far on what that is.
Hi, Moyo. I love that. That is a bar. I need to clip that and share that with so many artists. Setting appropriate goals for yourself, ones that will challenge you, ones that will help you move forward in your career, but also ones that can actually be done is so crucial to success. And even you being aware of the, we'll call it the balance and finding that, like, okay, some of the creativity had to be the time, your bandwidth had to adjust. We'll say that. That is really ill. And again, you're still achieving amazing things across the board. It's not like anything is necessarily suffering. It's just it's getting done in due time. You had multiple portraits that you took appear on Times Square billboards, which you said was one of your first goals of the year, and you knocked that out. What was that, first 2 weeks of the year? So hats off to you. You already said that you are very, very intentional about the things that you say you are planning to do. Here on Money Trees, I love how I started this show as a way to, one, give shine and learn more about the artists that I see in the space that captivate me. And I told you, my this was worth it for me just preparing for the episode. And I've already gotten amazing insight chopping with you. But as I went through and just explored more of your work beyond the few pieces that originally caught my attention, I feel like I am all the better for it. Can you leave us with one of your goals that you plan on accomplishing? Not even in the next year, but just a goal that you plan on accomplishing.
Oh, I think I'm kind of already working towards achieving this particular goal, but a goal that I've always wanted to achieve and explore is curating my first exhibition. And that's something that I hope to achieve and get done before the end of this year, be it a solo exhibition of my work or a curated exhibition of the work of others. I just want to finally see kind of like the fruits of not only my labor but the fruits of others' labor in a space, be it virtual or physical. I think I find it very important for artists to experiment and show their work not only on scale but physically and in person. And I think within the NFT space we forget a lot of the times that although we're so physically immersed into the idea of the metaverse and the concept of the metaverse, physicality, the in-person world, our waking life is still extremely important. And as artists, we shouldn't put that aside. We should create, we should hold, we should feel. And that's definitely a goal of mine, is to curate an exhibition to achieve all of that.
I would love to see that exhibition come to life, and I'm very confident that it will. Moyo, I want to thank you. There's not enough thanks. Thank you, thank yous, excuse me, to give you for coming on the show. Again, I feel like I'm all the better for it. And you really got my brain turning when I just looked at the metaverse from your perspective. And that is something I cannot say about a lot of people. And yeah, that's just it's insane. I'll have to like offline with you in a couple of months and just show you like, yo, this was the idea that spawned from this. Thank you again. But before I let you get out of here, there are two questions I ask every guest of the show. The first question is going to be, what is your seed phrase? Now, I know in crypto, Web3, your seed phrase is normally your account recovery key. For us, we are here planting seeds, planting ideas. We are repurposing seed phrase to be a saying, a quote, a slogan, a lyric that you live by that embodies your approach to your art, to your career, to your craft. Moyosore Briggs, what is your seed phrase?
I mean, it's not too profound, but something that I do say every single day is everything happens for a reason. And this intrinsically ties into my beliefs of, it's, I know it's the end, but it's going to get a little bit deep here. It ties into my beliefs of quantum realities and quantum physics, and how there are infinite possibilities to the things that we can do. And if you feel as though you've made a mistake in one thing, the possibilities that have been birthed from that single mistake that you think has ruined everything are completely endless, incomputable, and every single thing happens for a reason for us. And we are the masters of our own universe pretty much through that in itself.
You are leaving us with a gem. So I think I love that you said that. Even though it's the end, we got to bury the seeds deep so they can take root and grow into amazing trees. And people ask me all the time, "What is my seed phrase?" And I tell them I will never say because it's all about the guest. But my one hint everything happens for a reason is pretty damn close to what mine would actually be as well. I second that. I believe that, like I said, it's not very profound, but I think, and you could even argue that it's cliche, but I would say cliches become cliches because of the universal truths of them. And once you stop struggling against the universe and thinking that something is the way that it shouldn't be, you free yourself up to be present and achieving whatever it is that is actually meant for you. So I very much agree that everything happens for a reason. My second question that I'm going to have for you is, we have this one of one Money Trees number 60 note. Sent me a fire picture. I know you said you didn't realize I was going to illustrate it, but it looks amazing on a note. We are going to list this on Zora as a one of one. 50% of the proceeds go to the guest. The other 50 are split between me and the artist. You are able to give it away. You are able to donate it. You are able to list it. You can do whatever you want with the NFT. But the actual question is, what are we going to list this NFT for?
I mean, it definitely ties back into the first thing that we discussed. For me, this is just another avenue and outlet of uploading myself onto the drive, as you've acted as another being and member of that process. And in the next 5-10 years, this piece will still be permanently on the blockchain, God willing. And yeah, it's being minted as part of, I pretentious to say it, but as part of my legacy on chain.
That's not pretentious at all. It is a part of your legacy. I feel so blessed to one to be at 60, but to have the 60 guests that have come on and grown in the garden, in a way, this is a part of my legacy. All of the contributions and the conversations that I have. And I think that one maybe less than or unpopular opinion is just that it's okay to kind of talk your shit sometimes. Like if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to? And there's a difference between, like talking down to someone is one thing, but just talking about how you feel and what you want to leave for future generations to see and experience is a whole other. And so I don't think it's pretentious at all. And I'm blessed that this Money Trees note gets to be a part of your legacy. Again, your art shit is insane. Like it really is. It's so moving. And I'm telling y'all, like I am so excited to see more of your writing. And the fact that you are so young, it is very, very exciting to see how that develops in the coming years.
Thank you so much. Honestly, this is hands down top two, and I'm pretty sure it's not number two, like interviews I've ever had, and spaces I've been given to talk about my work. And also I really appreciate it because I feel like I'm finally in a position where I have more of a stable thought and understanding of art and the art that I create. So I really appreciate being given this outlet to have such an insightful conversation, and all the questions were so amazing. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. As I said, I do not have enough thank yous for your time today, for your wisdom, and for just the art that you share with the world. And you share your life. You really, really do. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. It's an experience. And yeah, again, just thank you for your time. And I'm very, very excited to see the coming months and years in the world of the Count. Oh, you know what? I know it's the end. I know it's the end, but best vampire depiction in pop culture, be it cartoon, film, book, anywhere.
Got this right here. Vampire Hunter D, definitely the best depiction of a vampire. It's an animated film, and the artwork. I've forgotten the artist. Tankashiro, something similar, but his that is what I try to emulate in my waking life. The stoic, all black wearing character just constantly hiding in the shadows. It's just embedded in my mind. 9-year-old me would have said Edward Cullen, and I'm very embarrassed for her. But definitely, definitely Alucard, Vampire Hunter D, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, Moyo, I'm going to get out of here. This episode will be available for everyone to listen very, very soon. And I guarantee there will be gems. And just one last point, 5 to 10 years, I hope that the Ethereum blockchain outlasts, I hope it's here for a very, very long time. And that means that this note will be here ideally much longer than we are, or at least us in this form, because maybe we're getting uploaded. And I would like that very much. Okay, see, now I'm tangenting again. It was already buttoned up with your beautiful vampire recommendation. I'm out of here. Peace out. This has been ill.